Hello, I'm Alex. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If this is your first time here, thank you for joining me. And if you've been here before, or if you're one of my subscribers, thank you very much for joining me today. And thanks for subscribing. I see the count going up almost every day, so welcome everybody. I make videos about daily life in Japan, mostly vlogs, and I also have a few videos out about tips and advice to get onto the JET program. Today's video is going to be about life in Japan, working in Japan as a foreigner or as a South African. I asked the question on my YouTube, on my WhatsApp, on my Instagram, if anybody has any questions about me or about living in Japan. And I'm actually surprised that I got quite a few responses back. So thank you to everyone who asked their questions. I hope I can answer them fully. Initially, I wanted to make one big video, but some of the questions were about me specifically, and the others were about my time in Japan, working here and living here. So I decided I'm going to split them up. So today's video is about life in Japan, and the next one I'll do a little bit more on moi. I'll be blurring out or removing usernames just for privacy, but you'll see your question there and you'll know that it's you. So thank you very much again for asking the questions. Okay, let's get started. Alrighty, the first question is, why did I choose Japan, and also why the JET program? So to answer the Japan question, that actually started a few years before I even decided to start teaching. My mother taught English in China for 2 years, and I was able to visit her twice. 3 times? Twice. And during that visit, that was the first time that I visited Asia in general, and it was the first time that I went to China. But during that visit, it really opened me up to exploring the East and maybe living and working there. From China specifically, what really stood out was the nature. The city where my mom worked was kind of not engulfed, enclosed, surrounded by this mountain range. So it was very lush and very green. And in a few places in China, they do take the natural environment quite seriously. So there were a lot of parks, a lot of reserves that you could go visit. And I just thought it was stunning because the plant life and the biodiversity, which is the same thing, is completely different to South Africa. The climate is more humid, more tropical, so everything just looks so much greener. And that was really the first thing that just tipped the scale for me. And then the second thing that really stood out was the students. My mom had always explained how in China the kids are a little more reserved, well, a lot more reserved than South African students. But I obviously had no experience to go off of. So I was able to visit during their school, like their normal school day. And when I saw how the classes were going, when I saw how quiet the kids were and they were listening to their teachers, I was like, maybe I can do teaching. And the third thing was honestly the money. I think teaching can be a very rewarding job. I think it's also a lot of work. And I think the pay in Asia actually matches the work that you do. Honestly, I think in a lot of teaching jobs, you get paid more than the work that you're actually doing. But I come from knowing a space where teachers are overworked and underpaid. So when I saw that, oh, okay, you're getting a generous pay for the work that you're doing, that was another green flag for me. So that was my introduction into even considering the idea of teaching abroad or working abroad in general. And then during my university career, my interest in Japan was sparked after watching Ghibli movies for the first time, which I know it's so late to discover them. I know many people watched Ghibli as a child. I don't know how I missed them. I just never knew that they existed until I got to university. I watched Spirited Away. I fell in love, as many of us Ghibli fans do. And from there, I really developed an interest in the language. And then the language introduced me to the culture, and learning more about the culture introduced me more to the people and the places that there are to see in Japan. So it was a very kind of like domino effect happening. And one thing that is a common admiration for me for the East in general, but specifically Korea, China, and Japan, is how well they document and preserve their history. If you are from South Africa, then you know, especially for colored people like myself, we don't have a lot of history, like tangible history. We have the stories that our parents tell us, we have the stories that our grandparents tell us, and if you're lucky, you have pictures from the past, or I don't know, songs or memorabilia. But I grew up not knowing a lot about my ancestry or my lineage. So it was always something I really envied from other cultures and other people, that they knew who their great, 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 great grandparents were. And even if they don't know them personally, like by name, they know where they come from and where specifically their ancestors originated from. And that's just something I've never had. So to see it so clearly, I'm struggling to get the word, but to see it so pronounced in China, but also in Japan, that was something that always kind of warmed my heart, and I wanted to experience that in person. And then the final thing that really sold me on Japan was the general cleanliness and the reputation of good transport and transport being on time. If you're also from South Africa, we have good public transport. It's just that, like, when you take the taxi, it's a gamble on when you're going to get to town or to get to your destination that you're going. It's up to the driver, it's up to traffic. It's a more laid back system of travel. But here, if the train says 3:05, you are not leaving at 3:06. Although recently there have been a lot of delays because of people in the way, or animals, or the weather. And I don't know, that's a big thing for me. So when I heard other people recommending Japan based on how clean the streets are, how well the services are run, including the transportation services, that also just added to the list of things that made me really like tick the box for, okay, maybe Japan. Yeah. Okay, and then the second part of the question was about the JET program specifically. So why I chose JET was just more, it was like English. I always operate from a place of, am I going to be safe somewhere? Because as many of you know, as a woman, it's not easy to travel alone, and it's not easy to relocate to another place, start a new job, and have a safe life, unfortunately. And I had heard of other people and other cases where people apply to jobs on these shady websites, and then it's like a front for human trafficking or something extreme like that. So that was always in my mind. Yes, you may call me paranoid, but I was just like, I can't go with like any website. It has to be something with a good reputation that many people know about and that I can check for myself. And that was the JET program. The first thing that was the green flag for me was because it's linked to the government, and your home country's government and the Japanese government know about you. The embassy knows where you are. They know where you're teaching, where you live. And there's constant like awareness that this little South African person is in Japan and we need to take care of her. And just lastly, because we do live in a capitalistic system, so money is something that I have to consider when taking a job. And I think in general, it's a good salary for a job. The only thing that does come up in conversations about JET is the whole conversation about English teaching in Asia and how a lot of people feel like it's being more automated, AI is taking over. And I agree to some extent. Where my disagreement comes in is that Japan still uses fax machines. And I'm just going to leave it there. Because I think we're fine. I think English teaching in person is still good for another 10 plus years. So if you are trying to come over here, now is the time to teach. Then the next question is kind of sandwiched into another question. So I'll try and string everything back together. But it's about what nerves or what major fears I had before coming to Japan. And I'm actually pretty proud and also privileged to be able to say that I didn't have any major fears in coming to Japan. I've been lucky enough to travel before I came to Japan. So I had some idea of what to expect and how it feels to be in a country that's not my home country. The only thing I didn't have experience with was living here. But I have to say I wasn't scared of that. I was nervous about meeting the students and meeting my co-workers just because I was aware of the huge culture difference that there is between us, and also the language barrier. Now, JET makes it very clear that you don't need Japanese skills before coming here, and I agree with that in most cases, but I always recommend and suggest to people that it's a good idea to get some form of Japanese practice in before you come here, especially if you know you're going to a rural location. Study Japanese. Don't worry if you're not getting it. You're gonna get it when you get to Japan. It's gonna click. How I overcame those nerves was just throwing myself in there. The first week and the first month of Jet was the hardest for me. I was nervous every single day because I just thought I was doing everything wrong. And I was meeting people for the first time. I wasn't sure if I was being respectful enough, because when you come to Japan, you will notice that there's a lot of politeness, and sometimes, even though they don't expect that back from you because you're a foreigner, sometimes you can feel like, am I doing enough? Yes, you are doing enough. If you're overthinking it, if you're thinking about it, that probably means you're overthinking it. I always keep in mind that the Japanese know that you're from a different culture and a different custom, so they don't expect you to act exactly the same as them. Yeah, that's just some unsolicited advice if you ever come here. And I think that previous question is a good segue into just some culture shocks that I experienced, because I wasn't nervous about these things before, but they became something that really bothered me while I was on the JADE program, some more than others. So the first one is office culture. First, it's the hierarchical social system that a lot of Japanese offices follow. Again, as a foreigner, you are exempt from a lot of this. They don't expect you to fall into their way of doing things completely. But I definitely noticed in my previous workplace, there was a complete change in the atmosphere whenever the principal or the vice principal would come in, especially unannounced. And there was like an unspoken hierarchy behind some of the teachers and how they decided things and made arrangements for events, which I'm not used to. I think in an office space in my country and in the West, you have your boss and there is that form of respect towards your boss. But in most cases, we're equal. We're equal parts of the machine and of the company that we're working in. But in Japan, you can definitely see and feel that triangle. Something that I also found really interesting was at my public schools, and I think this is only at rural schools or like Hokkaido schools, but if you are an ALT watching this, please correct me if I'm wrong. But in public school, at the beginning of classes, the students have to stand up and they do like a little, it's a very military style greeting, and then they all bow and then they sit down again. At the end of class, they also stand up again. One of the students says thank you very much, and then everyone else repeats thank you very much in unison. Like the first time I heard it, I got goosebumps because I was like, uniformity. The next culture shock is the gaijin seat, which I won't go into too much detail about because there are plenty of videos on it. But it's basically where a lot of Japanese people don't want to sit next to you as a foreigner, so they'll always keep the train seat or the bus seat next to you open. If you're already having a bad day, it can really get stuck in your head because it feels like, do I stink? Like, why don't you want to sit next to me? But on good days, I generally just feel like, wow, all this space just for me. So it's a 50-50 situation. Like, it depends on the day. But in general, I just think it's stupid. I don't get it. Something random is, I don't know if it's all Japanese dentists' offices, but the ones that I have visited, when you get your teeth done, if you aren't having surgery, why can't I speak? If you aren't having surgery and you are just getting a routine procedure done, everyone is in the same room and it's just like separated by these curtains. And I always thought that was very peculiar, that you don't have your own private dentist room that you go to. But again, it could just be the hospitals or the dentist offices that I have visited. And then the last point is more of a social culture shock, and I can go on about these, but I'm trying to keep them short. The one thing that really just stands out to me, and this is simply like, I can't even say that, like, I can obviously express my opinion about it, and I don't like it very much. Seeing how husbands and wives interact with each other. I think in general, everyone has heard of the stereotype that Japanese people are not very affectionate. I have seen a lot of couples where the men are, what I think, are just rude to their wives. Like, I'll hear the wife say something to the husband. Yes, I know, I need to get out of people's business. But I'll hear the wife speaking to the husband and the husband won't show a lot of interest in what she's saying. Or he'll just be on his phone, or he'll be like, And I have these two older students who are maybe in their 80s now, and they were telling me how that was common when they were young, and that was just the practice, that you are rude to your wife. And he said it in those words, and I was like, I don't like that at all. The other part of the question was, oh, it's actually a separate question, why I decided to return to Japan. So I finished the JET program after 1 year, and then I went back to South Africa, and then I got a job at an eikaiwa where I'm working right now. And the reason I came back to Japan is because I felt like my time in Japan wasn't finished yet. I really do enjoy living here for the most part. And I had initially decided to do 3 years in Japan on the JET program, but then for some other reasons, which I made a different video about, I decided to only do 1 year and decided to change jobs. So all of the reasons why I initially came to Japan are still the same reasons why I'm staying here. It's pretty safe, I'm making good money, I have friends here, and there's a lot that I still want to see and do in Japan. So I just feel like my time here isn't completely finished. And an add-on from there is, if I see myself living here permanently or just like long term, no, I don't. For all the good things that are in Japan and for all the things that I enjoy, I think at the end of the day, the system, like the working system, is just too much for me. People are overworked, people are stressed, and because we are foreign workers, you are exempt from a lot of those responsibilities. But I just don't like being a part of that kind of working system and that kind of thinking where you have to work yourself to the bone until you have nothing left to give. Then only are you seen as a valid worker. My brain just doesn't work like that. So I don't think I want to be part of a society that thinks that way. I think Japan is great for vacations. I think it's great to come and visit your family here. I'm excited to bring my family over here. But in terms of long-term working, especially in Japanese companies, it's a no-no for me. And then finally, I think the most asked question of all is my best and worst experiences in Japan so far. So the best, I would have to say, is experiencing the public transport system in Japan. If you know me, you know I bring this up a lot and I can get so annoying about it, but it's because it's really so convenient in Japan. Like, the buses are on time, the trains are on time, you never have to worry about being late. If you're late, it's most likely your own fault because the train will be there at the time that it said it's going to be there. And then general cleanliness in the towns or the cities that I move around. But in general, the streets are really clean. The banks, hospitals, convenience stores, supermarkets, like all the public places that you visit, the parks are pristine. And I gotta tip my hat to Japan for that. Another thing at the top of my list of experiences are my holidays in Japan, because I think every holiday has been so different than the previous one. And the nice thing about living here is that you can experience old traditional Japan, or you can experience the more modern, like neon lights version of Japan, depending on what you're in the mood for. So I've been able to explore some of Hokkaido, and now that I'm here in Kanto/Chiba region, I can see more of the Tokyo area. And there's so much to do in Japan. Like, for any interest that you have, if you're an outdoors person, indoors person, if you enjoy being around people, if you don't really enjoy being around people, there's something for everyone. And I think that itself makes it a good experience to be in the country. So I know it's not a specific based experience, but it's like every single holiday that I've had in Japan has been. And then finally, I think safety is one of the best things about living in Japan. I'm a woman. I've been harassed for most of my life. I know what it feels like to go outside and feel unsafe. And I have to say, 99% of the time when I'm in Japan, I feel fine. I don't feel like I need to be looking over my shoulder constantly. Most of the time I'm walking with my phone and my wallet like in my hand like this. So in terms of physical safety, I think it's something that's very important to me, and that's why I rank it as one of the best things or the best experiences in Japan. So I hope I answered that question, but those are my best things about living in Japan. Now, onto the complaints. The number one worst experience that I've ever had in Japan is experiencing the price of fruits and vegetables. And this is a hill that I will die upon. I will never shut up about it, because why are we paying so much? I understand logically that because Japan doesn't have a lot of farmland, they have to import oranges, apples, dragon fruit, bananas come from Philippines. everything comes from another country. I understand. But just because I understand doesn't mean I have to be happy about it. It's ridiculous. And as someone who loves eating fruit, as a lot of us do, I just feel like it's it makes me so angry. And especially because in South Africa things are really cheap because we have a lot of farms in South Africa. They are orange, is it orchards? Do you say orange orchards? Whatever orange trees, a string of them are called. They're all over the Western Cape. We have grapes all over the Western Cape again. We have apples, we have bananas, we have everything there. So nothing is exorbitantly priced. So when I came here and there were all of these, like everyone was saying, you know, Japan is so amazing and it has this and it has that, but it doesn't have cheap fruits. I don't know if I can rank this next one as a worst experience. It's just the general peeve that I have is the passive aggressive culture in Japanese society paired with the awkwardness. And awkwardness I can understand. I'm also awkward. I'm very socially awkward. I'm becoming better. So that I have patience for. But even with me, a self-identified awkward person, if I spend enough time with you, I'm gonna get more comfortable and then I won't be as awkward. But sometimes, especially in the workplace, I've worked with people like at my previous job for a year and they were still as nervous and anxious and awkward and robotic as the first day that I met them. And this is a lot of people. It's not just one person. So that's why I'm grouping it as Japanese people, but of course it's not every single Japanese person. These are just generalizations. So that's something that can start to bother you, especially as a foreigner in the country. A lot of older people already are going to look at you like, well, they won't look at you like that. They'll discreetly stare. But added that into a working place, it's not the most fun experience. And then I would say the worst experience that I've had up to date, and I think this is so ironic because when I got these questions for this video, that was like 2 or 3 days ago, I thought to myself, wow, I don't actually have anything terrible that's happened to me in Japan. Like, things have been, for the most part, great. And then the universe took a turn. I was flashed for the first time in my life and in Japan, like 2 nights ago, this guy cut me off in the middle of the street. He was in a car and then he just opened his pants. And to make it worse, like I walked away and then he followed me with his car and he kept like calling me towards him. And it was fine. Like I just ignored him and I kept going to the store. Again, I just waited there until he disappeared. But that was honestly the worst experience that I've had ever. Not just in Japan. So obviously flashing in itself is not a Japan exclusive thing, but you can do a little bit of research on this. There are a lot of sexual crimes that happen in Japan that are just very, very strange. And that's a whole other conversation. So I would say that's the worst thing to happen. And it did take away a lot of the safety that I felt in Japan before this. And it's also just making me be more aware of my surroundings because I think I was taking it for granted how easy it was for me to just walk around like airy-fairy. And now I just have to be aware of the people around me, which sucks. But I guess that's life. And then speaking of best and worst experiences, I also got a question about the best and worst things about solo travel. And I haven't done a lot of solo travel, honestly, in my life. And it was probably last year when I still lived in Hokkaido. But just from moving to Japan and traveling in general, and then the limited solo travel experiences that I have, I think the best things about it, number one, would be the freedom that comes from traveling. I have a note in my phone, like in my notes app, about the best feelings I've ever had in my life, and being on an airport on my way somewhere is like somewhere at the top of the list. There's nothing like it. I can't liken it to anything. It's one of the best feelings in the world. It's just knowing that you're going to a different place and there's so much to experience and so much to see. It's the travel bug. And I'd say the second best thing is the self-discovery that comes from traveling by yourself. I've never done a solo international trip. I don't know if you if you can count moving to Japan as a solo travel trip. You learn how to depend on yourself a lot more, how to trust yourself, and you also learn a lot about what you like and don't like, even if you are quite self-aware. For example, I used to think that I was a person that wants to do an entire itinerary for a trip, and at 9 a.m. I have to be here, at 3 p.m. we have to do this, and at 6 p.m. we have to do this. And I found that I'm actually a very in-between person in that sense. I enjoy having an itinerary to stick to, but if I don't get to everything, it's also not the end of the world. And it's more about the experience of being in that place versus ticking things off of a box that some influencer told me I should do, you know? But I think, speaking from my experience as a woman, it's just keeping safety in mind. So one of the worst things about solo travel as a woman is that a lot of destinations are unsafe for you because some men like harming women. So being sure to hyper research the places you're going to, but also at the same time keeping a healthy balance of having your own experience in a place, which I know can be counterintuitive advice. It's like, be careful where you're going and make sure you know everything about this place. And then the other side of it is like, just embrace and just go for it. But it's keeping a healthy balance between those things, because I think travel is worth it. I think if you have it in your heart that you want to see somewhere, you should go. You should make it happen. Okay, the next question is actually two questions, but I'm just going to sandwich them together. The things I like the most about living in a foreign country. Japan specifically, it's everything I mentioned before about the best reasons for living here. So it's the transport, it's the cleanliness, it's the safety. And I think most of the food is pretty delicious. I don't eat everything, but the Japanese food that I do enjoy is really good. I love takoyaki. Of course, I love sushi, and there's a sushi restaurant called Hamazushi, and it is the best thing since sliced bread. And the things that I miss the most about South Africa is the people, like the friendly and warmness of people, friendliness. Like I mentioned before, in Japan, people can be a little more cold and less emotionally affectionate, so it feels a little harsh sometimes. And I miss in South Africa where you can pass people and you can have conversations, and you can go to the shop and ask the cashier, how are you doing? And she'll be like, I'm good, girl, how are you? And it's just such a nice warm response that I just don't get here. So I really miss that. I miss drier summers. I don't enjoy the humidity at all, and I miss getting burnt to a crisp by the African sun. I miss appropriately priced fruits. And of course, I miss my friends, my family, I miss my boyfriend. And it ties into the first point, the first thing that I miss. It's just, I miss that South Africanness of people. Really miss that. And I miss the beach / the ocean. Beaches in Japan are a little different in their rules. Some of them are specifically surfing beaches, and if they are swimming beaches, it's usually an area that's like that you are allowed to swim at. And because society here is a little more modest, you don't see a lot of people wearing bikinis and walking around in swimsuits outside of summer and like the very hot time of the year, which is July and August. So actually during Golden Week, vlogs will be linked up here. My friend and I visited a beach, and I wore my bikini underneath my clothes with the intention of going into the water, but I felt so self-conscious because nobody else was wearing their swimsuits. And I know I shouldn't care, I should just do my own thing, but I'm always very hyper aware that I am a foreigner in this country, so that makes me a little nervous about certain things, which I shouldn't be. But anyway, I also received a question about dating in Japan as a person of color, and unfortunately I cannot answer that question because I am happily in a relationship. Unfortunately, it's long distance, and I've been in this relationship since I came to Japan. So I can't speak on what the dating experience is like here, but I have a lot of friends who have been through dating in Japan as people of color, and I cannot say that it's been the best experience, but I would rather refer you to other content that is all over YouTube. There are so many videos about this topic. So I don't want to speak on something that I have no experience on. All I will say is that in Asia, there seems to be a very big percentage of men specifically, but I'm sure it's just across the board, of people who have a fetish for women of color, and specifically Black women from Africa. So just be careful and do your research and have a group of friends that can help you vet your dating partners. Next question.
Why are you gay?
Who says I'm gay?
You are gay, 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 gay. Why are you gay?
I just had to put this in here. My friend said it to me as a joke, and I just had to put it in here. Okay, on to the next serious question. Yes. Just interrupting this broadcast, I got an extra question after I already finished recording. So this was about racism in Japan. And first, I can't speak for everybody, ever on any topic. I can only speak from my own experience. And I guess the first thing I want to say is that there will always, unfortunately, be racists in any country that you travel to. I myself cannot say that I've experienced overt racism in Japan. I've experienced what I would call microaggressions or passive racism, and I put a question mark there because in those cases I'm not sure if I'm being treated weirdly because of my skin color or because I'm a foreigner, because in Japan it's a little hard to tell the difference sometimes because many people are not used to foreigners, which to me is still an odd concept, but such is life. So additionally, even though I'm from Africa and I'm from South Africa, I have a lighter complexion, which means that I have something called light skin privilege. So my experience in life is generally going to be easier while we live under the system that we live in. But I would say that on the scale of overt racism and like the things that we see in countries like the US, Italy, or France, specifically anti-Black or anti-African racism, I would say in Japan, the chances are very unlikely that you're going to experience it, like I said, overtly. And I think that's because of that tatemae concept that I spoke about earlier, and also the idea of keeping harmony and unity and politeness in Japan. So even if they are thinking unsavory thoughts, it's unlikely that they're going to say something to you or treat you visibly differently. Oof, and I know I answer all of these questions in a very long-winded way, but I just wanted to add what people explain in terms of their experiences in different countries. Just keep in mind that that's their experience, and it's not to say you are going to have the same experience. I know that we should keep safety first and foremost in our minds when we are traveling, but sometimes it helps to talk to a bunch of different people and make that decision for yourself. So all I'm saying is don't let another person's opinion sway you from making the decision for yourself. Anyway, I'm done. All right, and that wraps up the video. If I skipped any of the questions, please forgive me. You can send them in the comments. If there are any extra questions, please send them in the comments. Let me know what you think about some of the things that I spoke about today. I love having discussions about Japan and just life here in general. I really hope this was helpful. I tried to answer every question as in-depth as I could, and I'm always happy to answer any more questions. Japan is not a fairy tale country. It's a country like any other with pros and cons. And I think if you come here with a very neutral perspective, you'll have the best chance at enjoying the country. So I will stop here. I've been speaking for way too long. Thank you so much for everyone who sent in questions. Thank you for watching this. And I hope you have a lovely day or night wherever you're watching this. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.